So please give a big white horse welcome for Enda McNulty. Now Enda, I want to put you in a time machine, a little bit like Michael J. Fox, and go back in time, the 22nd of September 2002. I'm kind of expecting that you'll remember where you were on that day. Tell us a wee bit about it.
First of all, I woke up, my legs were shaking. My legs were shaking literally like a little lamb's legs. I'll never forget, Benny Tierney was in the room with me. Benny Tierney was the Armagh goalkeeper. He was a joker. He was the clown of the team. And as soon as I woke up, he's already telling jokes. And I'm trying to say, Benny, this is the biggest day of our lives. Will you please refrain from telling jokes at this stage? I can remember brushing my teeth in the hotel room in the City West, and Benny Tierney is telling jokes. And I said, again, Benny, my stomach's sick. My legs are shaking. Please, please, will you wait at least till we get onto the bus until you start telling jokes? More than anything else, and it's again a bit like what the guys were saying earlier on, massive self-doubt. Massive self-doubt even having breakfast. Felt too sick to have breakfast, didn't feel as if I could put anything in my stomach. I think I ended up asking for ambrosia creamed rice because the only thing I get in my stomach. And a lot of high performance athletes, you'll find exactly the same thing. They can't have on big game day what they normally have on a big, on any other performance day. So I vividly can remember that. I can vividly remember getting on the team bus or heading towards the team bus from the City West and starting to cry like a little baby as I walked down the stairs in the City West when there's literally thousands of Armagh fans in the lobby of the hotel. We could hardly get onto the bus and it caught us by complete surprise. My mental preparation obviously wasn't good enough because as we were getting onto the bus, Aidan, there was 1,000 Armagh fans standing either in the lobby of the hotel or just outside the hotel, and we were trying to get through them almost like sheep going through the woods to try and find a way onto the bus. And again, my sense of anxiety and nerves just multiplied 10x as we were getting onto the bus. And I remember thinking to myself, I can't do this, I'm not up for it, even though I had spent maybe 15 years of my life to get to that point. So my initial reactions, Aidan, was massive anxiety, massive self-doubt, really, really big fear in terms of what lay ahead for us and the team. The good news is that same Benny Tierney on the bus kept telling the jokes, and the more jokes he told, the more I started to giggle, started to smile, the more the back of the bus, and I always sat in the back right-hand corner of the bus. The back of the bus almost collectively started to laugh together, and I started to notice that the laughing was easing the nerves at least a little bit. So my initial reaction and my initial vivid response to the 22nd was getting out of bed.
Yeah, the horror. And then, I won't say fast forward, but when the final whistle went, have you any recollection of that moment, or how much of it has become blurred, or is it second-hand at this stage?
Oh, it's very vivid. I suppose I'm very lucky. Everybody in this room is very lucky. If you hadn't the upbringing you've had, you wouldn't be interested in coming along this evening. I was very lucky in terms of the upbringing that my mum and dad gave me, literally from my first memory sitting in Croke Park. That was actually my first ever memory. Sitting in Croke Park as a 4-year-old, and my father was the coach of the Armagh team playing the National League final. And I remember my father vividly saying, if you guys don't step up to your potential now, you'll regret it for the rest of your lives. That Armagh team in that year didn't step up to potential in 1980. For Armagh in 2002, again, I had it in my head, the most important thing of all was that myself, my brother who was playing alongside me, and the team stepped up to our potential. And hopefully the same for you guys and your kids. You're challenging, you're inspiring, you're coaching people to step up to their potential.
Yeah, fabulous. Did it matter, or how much did it matter that in winning the first ever All-Ireland for Armagh, that it was Kerry were the opposition? And I'm not saying that because we're sitting in Ballincollig, by the way, but
I'd have to disappoint you guys, it didn't really matter. It didn't matter. Whenever I was a kid dreaming about winning the All-Ireland, and it was a vivid dream, I never really dreamt about who was going to be up against it. That was inconsequential. The media built a lot about Kerry, and before that match and after the match. Now we're very good friends with the Kerry boys and very good friends with the Cork boys. So it didn't matter who it was. You asked me about the memories immediately after we won it. I can vividly remember the people I met. And now more so than the pride we have of winning the All-Ireland, it's more the pride we have of making a positive difference in people's lives. We meet a lot of old men now when we go home, and they're maybe 80 or in some cases 90 years of age, and they still say it was the best day of their life. So for me, I'm more proud of that than I am of the achievement of the 15 years it took us to go and win the All-Ireland. So the Curry thing was inconsequential. The impact we genuinely believe we made in people's lives in Armagh, that was massive. I met a guy in Microsoft recently, we're doing a lot of work at Microsoft, and I met a guy in Microsoft in the lobby who said that the day that Armagh won the All-Ireland was his father's greatest day in his life. So it's pretty profound to hear something like that, you know. I feel pretty lucky and privileged to be involved with that journey.
Yeah, yeah. When, I suppose it's a question for, I guess, someone who has been fortunate enough to experience that elation of winning, but do you think something changed in you when you could close your eyes and say, I've won an All-Ireland with Armagh, I've done it? Did that flick some kind of a switch? When you were talking about shaking like a lamb that morning, like, was there a visceral change within you, do you think?
There was a big change, and the big change was, and this is almost quite sad to say it, I wanted to win another one.
There you go.
So, as soon as we got into the lift there, I remember putting my arm around my little brother who happened to get into the lift at the same time as we couldn't get down the stairs in Croke Park. It was so crazy and hectic and manic. The stadium was almost shaking afterwards. The Armagh fans were so jovial. So we actually get into the lift, but I never forget my younger brother Patrick, who's now 25, he was a little kid, putting my arm around him, and bigger brother Justin, who was full back for the team. I remember putting my arm around my bigger brother Justin saying, what about next year? So the first thing, and maybe this is quite sad in a way that almost opposite of what Niall was saying earlier on, it didn't stop to think, I really want to savour this. So the thing that changed in me was, almost like a heroin addict, I wanted another one. I wanted to feel and get the sensation again. Spent another 10 years of my life probably after that trying to win another one. Unfortunately, we never won another one. There's not a day goes by that I don't think about the fact we never won another one.
I remember reading Andre Agassi's autobiography. I'm not sure if people have had a chance to read it. I recommended it. A very brutal insight into a guy who had a funny relationship with tennis despite being one of the greatest players. But one of the things that I found really sad, to pick up on your word, was the fact that for him, even though he won I don't know how many majors, the pain of defeat totally outweighed any satisfaction he ever got from winning. But how many years are we gone? 13 years since. How does your scales tip right now? As you look back on it.
Well, I would have to say, and maybe it applies to everybody in the audience in different ways. I can literally remember not being able to get out of bed for 2 months after defeat against Tyrone in 2003 All-Ireland final. So we got to the All-Ireland final the next year against Tyrone. We played poorly. Probably bought into the media. The media made comments about the Armagh team at that stage that if Armagh continued to be as physical, we were going to leave people in wheelchairs. We probably listened to the media. There was some ridiculous comments like that. We listened to the media and we toned back our physicality. We never performed, we never stepped up our potential. We weren't even close to backing ourselves in the day. We were more worried about the referee than we were worried about performing. So after that final, I wasn't interested in anything in life, just completely. I suppose it was as close to at any stage of my life being depressed. No interest in anything, no interest in work, no interest in training, no interest in eating well, because I would eat incredibly well and have done since I've been a kid. No interest in, basically lost my passion and purpose in life because we got such a big defeat. So yes, I can understand and empathise with Agassi. Now, a lot of the athletes we work with, unfortunately, we get athletes in major lows. And we get athletes in lows who it takes us 12 months to coach them through those lows. Thankfully, I can empathise with that because I've been the guy in bed, not wanting to get out of bed, not having the sense of purpose or the motivation to get out of bed.
On that topic of the motivation, I often hear guys talking who've been involved in successful teams, and again, like, people are going to have different views, but I've heard the argument a lot that after a period of time that the guys in the team, their obsession is whatever about the fans or the family and the friends or whatever. It's the bond they have between them. That's their primary motivator. That's when they're going out on the pitch, they want to win it for the group. And that's not to say they don't care about the lads in the stand. But do you recognise that, or where did that motivation come from? When you were feeling that pain Was it a sense of kind of loss to self, or rather that sense of I've let down me dad, or whoever else you were thinking about?
Yeah, I think it's almost split that into two. So first of all, what motivates any of us, and the second thing is why was it so devastated? Part of that was ego.
Yeah.
Now in reflection and the self-awareness that Niall referred to earlier on, part of that probably was I'd invested so much in it.
Yeah.
In 2003, I dislocated a shoulder. The doctors and the surgeons told me I wouldn't play football again for 3 years. I was back playing 9 weeks later. So, to be honest, I'd invested so much. I went through a lot of agony in trying to get my shoulder back functioning again, back getting the muscle mass back in my biceps, trying to get my hand moving again. So with a lot of investment in that, a lot of pain, a lot of agony, a lot of sacrifices.
Yes.
That stage, the girl I was going with for 10 years, the relationship broke up because she knew that I was only interested in one thing in my life. And again, that's quite sad to say it. Beautiful girl, absolutely beautiful girl, amazing girl, but I sacrificed that relationship because I want to win Northern Ireland. So that's another reason why I felt, I was so absolutely devastated. Now, in terms of the bond, bond part of your question, Aidan, I think in all teams, and some of you guys are running small businesses, some of you guys are running Ballincollig Rugby Club, some of you guys are involved with athletic clubs, some of you guys have previously been a pharmaceutical, some of you are currently involved with life coaching, some of you are hugely into cooking. I think the girls have just met here briefly. In all those different performance crucibles and all those different teams, different things bond people. However, what we all have in common is that we're all team people. We're all team people. We all feel natural when we're part of a really strong cohort in terms of our inner circle. So it's natural to us. Now, the best coaches, the best leaders are brilliant at engineering a way that the bond is unbreakable. Right. And that Armagh team, it took us the guts of 10 years to build that unbreakable bond. So when we got out in the Croke Park on that 22nd of September, we felt that it didn't matter whether it was Kerry or Dublin or Cork, it didn't matter. We had that incredible, unbreakable sense of belief, So because the bond was so tight, now how was that forged? A lot of defeat, for a start. A lot of good nights out.
Okay.
A lot of those nights out in Belfast when we met a lot of our competitors from Derry or Tyrone, or some of the Cork guys who were living in Belfast, or the Kerry guys, or the Clare guys living in Belfast. To be honest with you, we noticed that they drank a lot at night. So the Armagh team started to say, when they drink, we drink water. When they are drinking shots at the bar, we'll be in the bar talking about winning Ireland. When those guys are eating burgers afterwards, we'll be going home early to our beds. Mightn't necessarily always be on our own in the beds, but at least we're going home to beds. So we started to look for a real strong competitive advantage. We started to look for marginal gains. Those of you that study sport would know marginal gains and how the best sporting franchises in the world are looking for little small things to differentiate them from their opponents at the highest level. So
that is actually what I was going to ask you about, through the lens of your acquired wisdom. Here we are in 2015 looking back at that panel, and that group of players. What do you think they had that gave them that edge, that they were, in the top 3 teams for about 7 or 8 years?
Yeah, well, we were very lucky again. Very lucky, and a lot of you, I'm sure, in your different sports and your companies and your lives, you've been lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. I was certainly in the right place at the right time in terms of how my brother was, how my father was. So when we were kids, my father wanted to do one thing, that was coach Gaelic football. Didn't want to do anything else. He was a teacher, then became a development consultant, but he wanted to coach us. My mother sacrificed her whole life to help us go and play Gaelic football. So in the summertime, when everybody else was working and getting part-time jobs, my dad said, Enda, go play football. When we were at college, Dad didn't say, Enda, get a part-time job. It was, Enda, train 10 times a week and focus on your football. So we're very lucky. Yeah. What was special about that Armagh team, all of those guys were similar minded. They sacrificed 10 years of their life for football. Mm-hmm. You don't tend to get that very often in life. Yeah. You don't tend to get a group of possibly 8 or 9, I would say, natural born leaders together at any one time. And we had natural born leaders. We had a guy called Paul McGrain, who possibly is the closest thing I've come to a saint in my life. I spoke to him last night at about 10 o'clock, and he was saying he was only after bathing his little girls. 3 little beautiful girls. He's a beautiful wife and a beautiful little boy, but he's a saint. I never heard him saying a bad thing about anybody. His nutrition, going back again to what Jane said earlier on, his nutrition is immaculate and always has been. He's a really positive influence. Sure. He's a guy who leads at the edge. What about you guys? Do you lead at the edge when the shit hits the fan? So a lot of those guys in that squad, the Kieran McGuinneys, the Paul McGreens, the McEntee brothers, they were brilliant leaders, you know. So what was unique about that team was we happened to be arriving at a period in our lives when we had about 8 natural born leaders who were like cultural architects. Yeah. We literally went to knock on guys' doors late at night in South Armagh, and that was quite dangerous in South Armagh, as you can imagine. And I can literally remember knocking on guys' doors to say, we can't accept your lifestyle. We can't accept the fact that you're drinking too much. We cannot accept the fact you're not in the gym 3 nights a week. We can't accept the fact you don't train on Christmas Day. And we literally would go and knock on those guys' doors and say that this is our environment, this is our culture. Not the coaches, not the conditioning coaches, not the sports scientists, not the nutritionists. In Armagh, we're working on nutritionists way back in 1998, 99, probably 10 years behind or ahead of a lot of the organisations we're now working with in high performance sport. But that was really unique. They were leaders, they were natural born leaders, but they were also resilient, naturally resilient because of where we were brought up, what we'd experienced as kids, whether it was a bit of soldiers, or whether it was bomb attacks in local communities, or whether it was people in our local communities and our families dying in the Troubles. Yeah. So that made us naturally resilient. Yeah. We were lucky.
Wow, yeah, and listen, fair play to you for making it happen. So I'd like to pick up on a point you just raised there, and what a beautiful phrase, cultural architects for any people in a group. But you were talking about the leaders and that you had a substantial number of them. Often when you observe teams, and when you're looking at sport, top level sport, like as Patrick Vieira used to say, the truth is on the pitch. You can see it. It's manifestly obvious. In the world of work, sometimes it's a little bit more complex, but it's still, you can see it. But it often strikes you when you see underperforming teams, and you kind of say, they really should be doing better, is that question of the, what little phrase I was going to call them, natural leaders, but that you have leaders that step up, whether from the middle, from the front, from the edge. Do you think that, again, based on your experience across the different fields, that you need to have a critical mass of those kind of guys in any setup for, to reach that level?
Yeah, well, I think first of all you need one. Okay. And you'll notice that one leader, even in your own business, you need one leader. The great leaders attract other leaders. The great leaders, almost like, a really good bee in the middle of the hive, they attract other brilliant leaders. Unfortunately, the opposite also applies. So we were lucky that we had maybe 8 or 9, and those 8 or 9 literally hunted for other leaders. So we weren't interested in who was the best footballer. We weren't interested in who had the nicest skills or who was in the best shape, because that's not going to last. That's not sustainable. It's who has the character, who has the leadership skills, who's the team skills, because we need to have both leadership skills and team skills. And we were pretty fortunate to have that combination. Now, what makes a leader? Well, I suppose it depends what performance domain we're in. However, there's commonalities across those in business, in sport, in family, and in life. And I think one of the biggest characteristics, and you referred to some of them already yourself, is we need to lead by example. And if we're going to lead by example, we need to lead ourselves. So what is your confidence like? What is your focus and your goals like? What's your discipline like? What's your ability to communicate to yourself like? What's your work ethos like? What is your composure like? Because it's very hard to speak to other people about composure if you're not composed yourself under pressure. Do you eat well yourself? Because I can't expect you to eat well unless I eat well. I can't ask you to train on Christmas Day if I don't train on Christmas Day. I can't expect you in business to work a 12-hour day if I don't work a 12-hour day. I can't expect you guys to spend every single day upgrading your thinking and your knowledge if I don't spend every day upgrading my thinking and knowledge. So obviously that's the fundamental, if you like, building block in starting off as a leader.
Yeah, it's a great answer. So for, I guess for everyone here, but just to give us a sense of the work you're doing today. So, like through like the work you do individually and through your business Motivate, just paint a brief picture of us, for us, the kind of work, who you're working with, and what the kind of stuff you do.
I suppose again, very lucky guys, absolutely blessed. I wouldn't call it work,
Okay.
So it's almost like I literally couldn't call it work. It's almost like a life's purpose, a life's mission that I was very fortunate that I almost, let's say, tripped upon. Tripped upon because of my mother and my father. And tripped upon because going to Gaelic football matches as a 10-year-old, my dad started to get me listened to in an old Reynolds 18. Any of you remember any Reynolds 18s? An old green battered Reynolds 18. And I can remember sitting in the car and my dad says, "Enda, listen to this tape." I said, what tape, Dad? My dad wasn't into music, so I knew it wasn't a music tape. And he says, "Listen to this tape." And it was a guy called Lou Tice. Some of you that study positive psychology may know Lou Tice. And he says, "Listen to this." And I said, "Dad, this is bullshit. Why do I have to listen to this?" But he wouldn't switch it off. Thankfully, he wouldn't switch it off. And even going to the games as a young kid, he'd get me to listen to Lou Tice. Lou Tice wrote a game-changing, world-renowned program called Investment in Excellence. And the program's all about your own psychology and how your own psychology can change your life. I was absolutely skeptical. I thought my dad was absolutely crazy. Now, thankfully, I realise the impact it's had on my life, it's had on my dad's life, and it's had on a lot of people's lives around the world in terms of who we interact with. And now, today, moving on, maybe not exaggerating, 31, 32 years, maybe more, since my dad started to inspire us with this information, we are working with people across the world. Basically, our mission is to inspire people every day to achieve their potential in life. And we're very fortunate to be able to do that, whether it's in high-performance sport at the highest level, whether it's working with the Irish Rugby team, whether it's working with Olympic athletes who will go to Rio, Annalise Murphy, whether it's working with some of the biggest global teams in the world, the Microsofts, the Facebooks, the companies like Digicel, obviously the companies like Intel. And what we do is, I suppose we do 5 things, if you put it into 5 key pillars. First and foremost, it's building high-performance teams. How do you get people to be a genuine team rather than a group of individuals? We do know from the research in the corporate world that 4 out of every 5 corporate teams are underperforming. So the first thing we do is we build high-performance teams. The second thing we do is we work with people in their mental toughness and their resilience. So whether it's an elite international rugby player playing out half, or whether it's a young mother who's got 3 kids and she's the head of sales for a global drinks organisation, she's travelling frantically around the world. The third thing then is around high performance coaching people to elevate their performance, whether it is the lead dancer for Riverdance around the world who's one of our clients, or whether it is the managing director of a technology organisation. The whole wellness space, we're getting massive opportunities again in terms of global companies, in terms of, let's say, joining up the dots. And really getting in and putting a very significant master plan in place, in which case they can track the performance levels in the organisation because of how vigorous and how integrated their overall wellness and performance programmes are connected. And finally then, I suppose, working in terms of what we call Togoro Leadership. And it's one of the things we would have worked with Stephen and his team with in MSD previously, when Stephen would have been at MSD. So the concept of leading self first of all, and then we start to think about leading at home, and then we lead in the community, and then we might be lucky enough to lead in terms of an organisation we're affiliated to, like, let's say, Ballincollig Rugby Club and so on.
Okay. So that is a diverse portfolio of clients that you're working with, when you describe them across those 5 pillars. Now, this might be a simplistic question, and I realise answering or asking it, feel free to bat it over and say it doesn't work. But have you observed common traits, behaviours, certain things across the more successful of all those people? Like, can you manifestly see that? Or are they too different?
Absolutely. I suppose Oscar Wilde once said, nothing bores him more than talking about himself. So I get very edgy, as you can see. My body gets very edgy. I get edgy in terms of I want to learn. Maybe it comes from my mother, maybe it comes from my upbringing, but I want to learn. You may have noticed me taking notes on you guys as you're walking in, or trying to get an understanding of who you are and what you do and what your challenges are and what your passions are. One of the girls, I asked her at the bar, what's your biggest passion? She sort of went, well, why am I asking that question? I'm really hungry to learn. In terms of answering your question, Aidan, More than anything else, of course you see commonalities. Of course, if you study successful people in life, and I don't mean who makes the most money, and I don't mean who wins the most All-Irelands, or who has the most caps for Ireland, or who has won the most All-Irelands for, you know, the Cork Camogie team. That doesn't really interest me. What does interest me is the people who achieve their potential, the people who live their life purpose every day, the people who get to 80 years of age with a smile on their face going, I lived a hell of a life. Like one of my friends who's a 75-year-old farm man in New York who might go into, I know you might ask me about him later on, Aidan. He for me is the epitome of success. Now, success of course leaves a lot of clues. I've spent 25 years of my life studying successful people, and I don't mean reading the books. Yes, of course, I'll read the book initially, but then I got brave enough to read the book and go and meet them. Whether I had to fly into New York, or whether it was the week before last in Papua New Guinea, meeting a guy called Father John Glynn as part of a work over there. Father John Glynn is from County Clare. Kilkee is what they call the place in Clare? Kilkee in County Clare, and he spent 53 years over there. I asked him, Father, one of the questions I want to ask you about is leader. I'll go back to your previous question. Hopefully my Armagh accent isn't too fast. Hopefully you're picking up at least a little bit of it. Please say aye if you can understand my accent. Please say aye. Yeah. And maybe some of the things I ask you later on, please interact, because nothing more boring than somebody talk about himself too much. Would you agree with that? Please say aye. Okay, good.
Well trained.
So I asked Father John Glynn, and hopefully I'm not digressing, what would you say about a leader? And he said, a leader is somebody who inspires, somebody who motivates, and somebody who empowers. So he's working with people with HIV, mothers who've been very badly raped multiple times, and who also have HIV, and he's trying to lead them. And he's trying to coach them, and he's trying to inspire them. So if you sit down with Father John Glynn, and then you sit down with an international rugby superstar, do you see any commonalities? Of course you do. One of the commonalities you see is their mindset. Do they have the mindset that is a positive growth, winning mindset? Or do they have a mindset which is almost fixed, losing, negative mindset? What about you guys? What are the mindset that you train yourself to have? That's one commonality amongst the most successful people in life who flourish. Another commonality is they're really teleological. Now, what does teleological mean? It means they're really focused in what they want to achieve in life. Their goals, bigger than the goals, of course. If we inject steroids into our goals, I know none of you guys are into your steroids, but if you imagine injecting steroids into your goals, that's your mission in life. And your mission in life is really, really a powerful, almost drug-like navigational point to move towards. So another big thing about the most successful people in life is they tend to have a very strong mission. The mission, of course, is weaved in almost like an old farmer's thread or baling twine. It's weaved into their purpose in life. So of course there's a lot of commonalities. I'm not going to bore you with them all. I would say that unfortunately today we need to think about completely scrapping our education system in terms of what I think, and we need to really build in the most successful character traits before we educate somebody on, you know, what is the economy like in Beijing, or what is the language they're currently using across the BRIC regions, obviously Brazil, Russia, India and China. And I think we need to really educate people on some of those commonalities, like confidence. Are we coaching our kids to be confident, or are we coaching them how to do law multiplication? Which is more important for kids? I would say confidence is a much more important character skill, which of course is very strongly aligned to how successful the kid is going to be. So if you draw a graph, and imagine I'm drawing a graph on an imaginary whiteboard, or maybe an old Ballincollig chalkboard, if we draw a graph, you'll see a direct positive correlation between somebody's confidence and how much they achieve in their life. Unfortunately, we'd also draw a negative correlation between their confidence and how much they achieve in their life. You know? So I think there's a very strong commonality amongst all those successful people.
You raised the FDNY story. I've heard you speak about your experience and the particular gentleman a few years ago. Please share your story, because it's too good to drop before we move on.
Yeah, well, again, very lucky that when I went to Queen's University to study psychology, didn't get in to study physiotherapy, never got enough points because I focused too much on, guess what? Yeah, you're with me at this stage. Got in and done psychology, and my first ever psychology lecture, I vividly can remember it because it was given by a lecturer who was studying or presenting on, and he was a professor in psychology, and he gave a lecture on motivation. I kid you not, this is how he started the lecture. Today we're going to speak to you about the theories of motivation. I'm going to speak to you about, and I vividly can remember his introduction paragraph. I'm going to speak to you about Maslow. I will also refer to Hertzberg. I will refer to the science and the research and the practice about logotherapy and Viktor Frankl, who endured the Holocaust in the Second World War. And he went on. Somebody theatrically has left the room as I was starting to say that.
Appropriately.
That is exactly what happened. As I was sitting there, everybody left. At the end of the lecture, and I didn't go to that many lectures, I'm not proud to say that. At the end of the lecture, there was 3 people left in a psychology lecture hall that had 150 people in it. There was 3 people left. I was one of the people. I was fascinated by how could this guy give a lecture on motivation and not be congruent. So in terms of one of the guys that I met at Queen's, very fortunately, who was absolutely congruent, was a guy called Desi Ryan. Now I want you to vividly imagine Desi Ryan. Close your eyes for a second, please. Desi called me, by the way, when I was on the train coming down here to wish me good luck. He'd saw on the web, he's 75 years of age, he'd saw on the web that this session was going on tonight. He called me to say good luck. Imagine him now, he's a man at 5'8". From Derry, he speaks very fast. Unbelievable passion. Look into his eyes, you can see his eyes dazzling. A man who's an incredible dad, first and foremost. I go back to Total Leadership. A man whose wife at 73 years of age is still madly in love with him. A man whose grandkids absolutely adore him and want to spend every waking moment with him. Keep your eyes closed, please. Desi Ryan is a man who trains every day of the week. Desi Ryan, when I spoke to him today on the phone, was out of breath. He says, Desi, are you okay? That's what he sounded like on the phone. Please keep your eyes closed. I says, Desi, is everything okay? Yeah. Desi, you sure everything? Yeah. He says, I just was out the back training. What were you doing, Desi? Skipping. I said, Desi, how long were you skipping for? An hour. An hour? Desi, what do you mean skipping for an hour? Yeah, and skipping for an hour. I've got a 400-metre race at the Nationals in 6 weeks. Yeah, he's still competing at the Irish National Championships at 75 years of age. Desi Ryan, more than anybody else in my life, has inspired me. Desi Ryan was a fireman in New York City for 25 years. Desi Ryan knows what authentic leadership is all about. Desi Ryan, in a brownstone building in New York City, was running up the stairs when everybody else was running down. Desi Ryan broke down the door with a hatchet when all of his fire crew hadn't the bravery or the balls, and I use that word for effect, hadn't the bravery or the balls to go up the stairs. Desi Ryan knew there was a little girl in the room. Desi Ryan met his mother as he went into the building, screaming what room, what floor the little girl was in. Desi Ryan made a little commitment to himself that he would not leave the room or not leave the brownstone building until he got the little girl. Desi Ryan did what his training told him. He got down on his hands and knees, and then when his ears started to melt, and maybe you can vividly think about what that looks like and what that feels like, when his ears started to melt, Desi Ryan got closer to the floor like a snake as his training told him. And he crawled and he crawled and he tried to crawl up the stairs, and he used his training and he used his conditioning, and he reverted back to his natural resilience. And eventually he crawled long enough until he heard a whimper. And at that stage it was a whimper because the little girl was losing consciousness. And he crawled until he put a hand on what felt like a bed. And he put his hand up into the bed, in underneath what felt like a blanket. And it was starting to get roasting as he could see nothing other than deep, deep smoke. Obviously completely almost pitch black, as any of you that know anything about a fire looks like. And what happened with Desi Ryan was he put his hand underneath the blanket, and he tells me that story vividly, very regularly. And he grabbed something, and it felt like a little arm, and he was absolutely ecstatic. He could feel in his stomach what it was like. And he was ecstatic, and he pulled it very hurriedly out of the bed. But then it felt too late. It was a doll. And he realised again that he had to go deeper into the room. He was still pretty confident from his training, and they're studying maps of buildings every day when they're not in real life fire scenarios. He was still pretty confident he was in the right room. And he crawled and he crawled, and he could still hear the whimper. The whimper was getting weaker. And he kept crawling. Until eventually he put his hand into another bed, a little single bed, a small bed. And he said he could vividly feel the springs in the bed. And again he could feel the whimper. And this time when he put his hand out, he didn't grab an arm, he grabbed a leg. And he grabbed the little girl by the leg, got her down on the floor, put a foil blanket around her, and slowly but surely wrapped the girl around him, and slowly but surely, like a snake, crawled down the stairs. I asked him, Desi, what did you say to yourself? He said he kept repeating over and over again, whatever happens to me, I will handle it. As is one of the mantras the fire department are trained to have. Whatever happens to me, I will handle it. And he said he could then feel his eyebrows sizzling. His eyebrows actually sizzled off. His ears didn't melt, but he said they felt like they were going to melt. His fireman's helmet he put on the little girl. He brought the little girl out. As he was coming out of the building, the roof fell in around him. The little girl was okay, protected her. He learned, of course, from his training. What about your training? He learned from his training how to protect the little girl with a shield, of course, how to protect the little girl with his arms. But as he got out of the building, the roof fell in around him. It hit him very significantly on the head. Of course, he hadn't got his helmet on. The helmet was protecting the little girl. It hit him across the crown of the head and cut his eyes. Please open your eyes. Cut him down the side of his eye. Still to this day, Desi's got a dodgy left eye. Still when you're talking to him, Desi will try and focus on you a little bit with that dodgy left eye. So in terms of one of the guys that I met at Queen's University was the guy who won a badge of honour for bravery. So again, I'm lucky to have met a guy like that. Not only did he coach us at Queen's as a Gaelic football coach, because he went back from the fire department, he got an insurance payment because of the injuries he sustained. And he came back and he set up a bar in Northern Ireland, a place called Ballinderry. And the bar was simply called Ryan's. Incredibly humble man. He never told the story to too many people, but he worked with us in Queen's as leaders. He worked with us on our mental toughness as he would do on our Gaelic football skills. He worked with us on our humility. He worked with us in terms of really forensically observing the opposition. So really to study the opposition better than anybody else was studying the opposition. He really inspired us not only to be good on the Gaelic football pitch, but to be good in life. He didn't want leaders who would just win a Sigerson, and under him it took us 5 years to win a Sigerson, which is the university football competition. I know there's some of the women in the audience or some of the men probably have no interest in Gaelic football. Gaelic football isn't important, I'm sure, to you, but it's not the Gaelic football that I'm referring to, it's the metaphor. It's a story I'm telling, hopefully it resonates with you or your wife or maybe your kids. And he taught us about life lessons. He taught us how to really step up whenever we were faced with adversity. We were mad, and I mean absolutely mad, that Queen's team. That Armagh team, yes, we were disciplined, but when we had good nights out, we were completely crazy. You can imagine an Armagh Gaelic football team, in case you think I'm overly sensible and overly, let's say, like a leader, and your model of what a leader looks like. Imagine an Armagh Gaelic football team in Hong Kong. How many of you have ever seen...
You don't have to close your eyes to picture that one.
How many have you ever seen that famous 3-series movie about a stag? What's it called?
The Hangover?
The Hangover. That's what Armagh were like in Hong Kong. Armagh also travelled to Thailand on a team holiday. I won't tell you all those stories. Armagh also travelled to Las Vegas. So as you know, The Hangover 1 is in Las Vegas. Now, we never had Mike Tyson in the film. And it wasn't like The Peaceful Warrior. But I can tell you, it was absolutely mad. Now, when we were at Queen's, we were absolutely crazy. I can remember coming from Cork playing in a freshers game, your first year university. How many of you can remember your fresher years, please? Hands up nice and high. Please say aye if you remember your fresher years.
Yeah, more to the point.
Okay, good. I'm sure there was a lot of really jovial nights, but I can remember coming from Cork in the back of a minibus after UCC beat us. Billy Morgan was the coach, I think, of UCC. And we had this bright idea that we'd cut the wires out of the back of the bus so that the tail lights weren't working. That was a brilliant idea until there was a crash. And that was a brilliant idea until the guards arrived on the scene. And that was a brilliant idea until the guys in the minibus behind decided they would do the same thing. So we were absolutely mad. So Desi Ryan, one of the things he did to us was he said, guys, I'm going to teach you a little lesson. From now on in this Gaelic football environment, we will never break a cup. We will always be courteous in every hotel we travel in Ireland or out of Ireland. We will always treat people with respect. We will identify our values now in our first meeting together that we will live every single day on and off the pitch. There will be no excuses for anybody not living those values. Everybody will be held to account for those values. And hopefully maybe that's relevant to some of the guys in the audience. So Desi Ryan, more than anything, I know of and on about him, but I couldn't talk enough about him because not only has he inspired me as a footballer, as a leader, he probably has inspired me for the rest of my life in terms of the values I need to live in all aspects of my life.
Fabulous. What a wonderful story. Mental toughness has featured a couple of times in the stories you've told. Unpick that phrase for us as you see it. What, you know, if you were to colour around, what is mental toughness? What does
Joe Schmidt asked me the first meeting I ever had with him the exact same question. I was speaking about mental toughness to Joe. I think it was in the Berkeley Court Hotel in Dublin, used to be called the Berkeley Court, and I was speaking about mental toughness of some of the Navy SEALs teams we've studied with or spent time with, some of the fire department teams, some of the teams in terms of technology teams we went to learn from, some of the athletic teams we learned from in Japan. And he said to me, Enda, stop right there, as Joe would do. He says, I don't understand, what is mental toughness? If it's so good, give me a definition. Thankfully, I knew the definition. And I said to Joe, my definition of mental toughness is ability to maintain confidence, composure, discipline and concentration when faced with adversity and when under pressure. So that's my definition of mental toughness that I would have learned about maybe 15 years ago in an elite training facility in the US. So that's my definition of mental toughness. Now there's a lot of skepticism about it. I don't think there's too much skepticism about Paul O'Connell. I don't think there's too much skepticism about Katie Taylor. I don't think there's too much skepticism about someone like Mother Teresa. I don't think there's too much skepticism about, let's say, the top corporate leaders in the world in manufacturing environments or perhaps in sales and marketing environments. So that's my definition. I'm not saying that everybody must agree it. Please don't agree with it, but please challenge your thinking in relation to it.
How did you get into the rugby? What happened?
Very lucky. And you can see a red thread going through my life so far, can't you? I suppose a number of things came together at the right time. Probably the fact that I played for Armagh obviously helped, because when you sit down with an athlete, one of the best things, and some of the young guys here are coaching athletes, some of the girls here are working with athletes in nutrition, some of the guys are rugby coaches, some of you are fitness coaches, some of you are strength and conditioning coaches, some of you are involved with coaching kids in athletics. I know Stephen's involved with coaching young kids in rugby, and his youngest daughter plays rugby. How did I get into rugby? Armagh helped, because young athletes relate to other young athletes. Young athletes relate to coaches. Young athletes relate to people who, using Phil Jackson's phrase, who've been in the bull ring, who understand what's it like when their legs shake, and you remember that story as you're sitting on the bus the day of the Ireland final. You know, because it's hard to read about that in a book unless you've been there. It doesn't mean to say if you've read in the book, it doesn't mean to say you can't be powerful, but it helps. So with Armagh, it did enable us to have a little bit of a profile. With Armagh, I decided long before the ball was over, what am I going to do with my life? I'm going to make sure we set up what in our mind is going to be a game-changing company in sport and in business. And at that stage, I thought about, well, I've learned a lot from Gaelic football, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life in Gaelic football. I want to work with pole vaulters. I want to work with people who are, let's say, track and field. I want to work with race car drivers. I want to work with people who are mountaineers. I want to work with people who are at the highest level in terms of boxing globally. And at that stage, I started to think about, in Ireland, who's the pro sports? I started to think about my strategic thinking and started to get business mentoring. Met really, really brilliant business mentors maybe, 15 years ago. And they said to me, well, there's only 3 pro sports in Ireland: rugby, soccer, obviously, and pro golf. Only 3 big pro sports of any really big note. And you can spend the rest of your life in Gaelic football or in, let's say, in track and field, but unfortunately, you'd be very passionate about it, but you're never going to make a living.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make a living. And I was sitting in the jacuzzi one night in David Lloyd in Clonskeagh, recovering from an Armagh training session. And this guy walked into the jacuzzi and he was cut to ribbons. Young kid, 16, maybe 17 years of age. I couldn't believe, you know the way when you see somebody who's like a complete specimen of a man. Girls, you know what I mean by that? Guys, you know what I mean by that in terms of you see a girl who's a complete specimen in terms of the physiology. This guy, I couldn't believe him. He was cut to ribbons. But also looking at his athletic prowess. I'm always looking at watching an athlete that coached 5 years before we set up Motivate. Just the way he moved, his grace, his athletic prowess was amazing. It was Luke Fitzgerald. Got chatting to him and again, wanted to ask him a lot of questions. Didn't want to talk to myself. Wanted to ask him, you know, who do you play for? Blackrock. What position do you play? Play in the wing. Sometimes I play fullback. Sometimes I play centre. Sometimes I play on the left wing. What's your ambition? I'm going to play for Ireland. What? I'm going to play for Ireland. How many times? He says, I'd love to play for Ireland over 100 caps. What do you mean over 100 caps? Who else do you play for? I like to play for the Lions. 16 and a half years of age. Vivid. Very vivid. And by all means, I'd love to go on the record of saying this, and I've no qualms with this being released, because Luke spoke about it very regularly afterwards. Hopefully Luke is now inspiring kids from Cork, and not only kids in Cork, kids in the Irish diaspora across the world about his story. And in that jacuzzi that evening, there was another young guy called David Moore who we got chatting to after Luke left the jacuzzi. And David Moore says, and I want to start working with you. And I said, what do you mean you want to work with me? Work with me on what? Work with me on my mental toughness. Work with me on my leadership. Work with me on what we call your performance excellence. So I says, yeah, okay, you're right, because I was a professional coach in Dublin as a coach and director. I was lucky enough to coach a lot of people in their strength and conditioning, their mental conditioning, their leadership, their technical skills, their tactical skills, and so on. I said, yeah, of course, I'll meet you, Dave. Met Dave for about maybe 10 sessions for free, because I knew that if I said to David, I'm going to charge you €100 a session, 10 sessions, what's the first thing a young kid's going to say? Can't afford it. So it says, I work with you for free for 10 sessions and hopefully I can add value to you. David Moore went on to play for Leinster, went on to play at the highest level in terms of under-20s for Ireland, Leinster and so on. But interestingly, David Moore said to Luke Fitzgerald, you should really meet Enda. Got a phone call from Des Fitzgerald, who's Luke's dad, who played for Ireland as well, and said, and I want to meet you. So before he let me work with Luke, he met me. He vigorously critiqued everything about me. Who was my mum, who was my dad, where was I from, did I drink, did I not drink, was I in the drugs, was I not in the drugs. He vigorously challenged every aspect of my personality, every aspect of my character. And then at the end, I'll never forget, big massive hands on Des Fitzgerald. Those are rugby fans amongst you would know. Big massive hands, he shook my hand, he says, I'll let you make Luke once. And if he decides after one meeting that he wants to work with you, great. Again, started working with Luke free of charge. That then led to an opportunity to work with Gordon Darcy, who was amazing because he was really, really switched on to the impact that your mental training could have on your performance. That led to an opportunity to meet a very interesting character called Michael Cheika. Michael Cheika was the coach, of course, to the Leinster rugby team, who at that stage were referred to by some in the media as gutless, spineless, leaderless ladyboys. Maybe you can remember those famous headlines. And Michael Cheika said to me, and I want to meet you for a cup of coffee. Met him for a cup of coffee in Ranelagh. Never forget it, because I was sitting up in my chair like this, and Michael Cheika was sitting back in his chair like this. Michael Cheika had sunglasses on, even though it wasn't a sunny day in Ranelagh. He spent the whole meeting looking through his sunglasses. I couldn't read him, couldn't see what he was thinking. He spent the whole meeting looking through his sunglasses, asking me, he must have asked me 100 questions. What was my thoughts on mental toughness? What is AQ? What does AQ stand for? What exactly can you do over a long-term basis in terms of developing team culture? What is a roadmap for team culture? What is a cultural architect? So he read a lot about me, and he really challenged me in every single aspect. I didn't know whether he liked me, didn't like me. He lay back in the chair, sunglasses on, and he literally didn't flinch. I had no clue whether he thought he was good enough to work with Leinster or not. He then said, "And I want to meet you once a week over the next couple of years." Met him once a week in Ranelagh for how much? Nothing. Because I wasn't interested in money. If you're starting a business up, guys, your first interest should not be money. If it is money, you're in the wrong business. So I work with him for nothing, and again, I'm very thankful to Michael Cheika. I have nothing but the most respect for him.
Yeah.
Then Michael Cheika gave me a call on a Sunday evening, December, maybe something like 5th, 6th, 2008. He said to me, Enda, you're in tomorrow morning with the whole Leinster team. I says, what do you mean tomorrow morning? He says, yes, tomorrow morning you're with the whole Leinster team. We're not at the races. We've got the players, we've got the leaders, we've got the talent, we've got the systems, we've got the environment, we've got the training platforms, we've got the conditioning, we've got everything, but just mentally, we're just not at it. You're in tomorrow morning. I went in to meet the Leinster Rugby team in the Burlington Hotel at, I think it was something like 9:15 sharp. And I remember, as you know, guys and girls, it's quite intimidating looking at the guy who's 6'9", Devon Toner, going, holy shit. Malcolm O'Kelly, again, 6'7", 6'8", looking at Brian O'Driscoll saying, holy shit, this is a global superstar in the room. How am I going to add any value? And again, you can see a pattern appearing now, can't you? Legs starting to shake a little bit. Was I good in that first meeting, Aidan? Abysmal. Afterwards, the Leinster players famously said to me, Enda, half the guys, the Australian guys in the audience, maybe Brad still can't understand my Northern Irish accent. There was a guy, Australian guy in the audience, there was an Argentinian guy in the audience, there was a guy in the audience from, I think it is, the South Sea Islands. Couldn't understand a word I was saying. Because at that stage, of course, I hadn't got any communications coaching at the highest level, so wasn't really coherent enough. But thankfully, Leinster went and beat Ulster the following weekend up in Ravenhill. Thankfully, if they had to get beaten, I never would have been seen again. So lucky, been straight up, incredibly lucky. Leo Cullen told me that afterwards. Incredible leader, by the way, for talking about leaders. Incredible leader. Leinster Rugby played Munster. If you can remember that game in Croke Park, please say aye. Leinster Rugby played Munster a few months after that. Really, really confident that the master plan we put together for that game was incredibly comprehensive. Really confident it was a world-class master plan. Leinster famously beat Munster. They went on to win the Heineken Cup. They went on then to win 3 Heineken Cups. Very lucky to have been involved with Leinster Rugby since. Would I say I'm the reason for Leinster Rugby winning those Heineken Cups? Of course I wouldn't. The guys who deserve the credit for that are the Leo Cullens, the Ethan Asiwas, the Shane Jennings. Incredible leader of men. Those guys deserve all the credit. I was lucky enough to be there in the right place at the right time, and hopefully I've helped point them in the right direction in terms of culture, in terms of team, in terms of leadership, and in terms of performance excellence. So that's how the Leinster Rugby story initiated.
Wow. Last week on my laptop, you know, one of these kind of pings, because maybe it was an email or whatever, but there's a thing that from LinkedIn, we all get these, well, if you're plugged into it, you get them, these emails saying from LinkedIn. One was, congratulate Enda McNulty, 12 years at Motivate. 12 years. If I, let's say, was Enda McNulty 2003, first day of Motivate, I'm sitting here right now, what does today's Enda McNulty say to day one Enda?
The time is 2 minutes past 12. We've only got started. The 2003 Enda McNulty would say, keep living your dream, because that's what I'm doing. The 2003 Enda McNulty would say, it doesn't matter who the hell you're working with or what they've won or how big the company is. I couldn't really give a damn what they've won or how big the company is. And that's one of the fundamental things the athletes have told me later, including, and I'd go on the record as saying Brian O'Driscoll, he said one of the things that really resonated with him was, I didn't give a damn that he had been one of the best players in the world, or was one of the best players in the world. I treated him as an equal. I looked in his eyes and asked him really, really simple, basic questions, you know. So the 2003 Enda McNulty would say, keep living your dream. He would say, mind yourself along the way, don't be doing too many 13, 14-hour days. He would certainly say, enjoy experience like this, enjoy being able to say thank you to a guy like Stephen Griffin. He would definitely say to me, you know, when you travel to Cork, make sure you book the next day off, a few pints of Guinness along the way. The 2003 Enda McNulty would say that you're on the right path. Make sure you don't in any way get sidetracked off that path when you get maybe opportunities that are so big that it's hard to turn them down. But stay aligned to your values, the same values that Desi Ryan spoke about. stay so aligned to those values, because in essence, they're the navigational points that will keep you on track towards your mission and towards living your purpose every day. The 2003 Enda McNulty would say, the humblest is always the greatest. Don't believe your own hype. Don't believe what anybody says about you. Listen to your mother, because she, every time you go home, absolutely treats me not only as equal to my brothers and my sisters, but probably inferior to my brothers and sisters. So he would definitely say, keep living the values that your mother and father brought you up with when you were a little kid at 4 years of age.
Yeah. Do you like being a business owner?
Absolutely. I think Jay-Z uses the phrase, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. Does that make sense? Maybe we'd have to reflect on that one a little bit. I'm not a businessman, I am a businessman. So in essence, it started off as being the business. Then I realised that I can't impact enough people's lives in a positive way unless I surround myself with people who are much better than me. And Stephen and Bernard, who's in the audience as well, who works for Dairy Gold, Stephen and Bernard would know a guy called Michael Dempsey, who used to be the managing director of a company called Bristol Myers Squibb, and then became the chairman of FOSS and was given the responsibility of turning it around and turning that culture around. So yes, I love being a business leader, but I love being in a team of people who are better than me. So Michael Dempsey is much better than me at business. A young girl we just brought into our team is one of the I think she was second in command in HR in Microsoft Ireland. Incredible girl, just amazing ability to coach and to inspire and understand well-being at a forensic level. Very delighted that one of the athletes I work with is almost as a kid, David Garrick, is now in our team as a performance director. Some of you know the international athlete David Garrick. So do I like being a business leader? Very proud of the fact that we're growing a business. Very proud, more important than anything else, that the message we got from Papua New Guinea a week and a half ago on stage in front of 1,000 people. They gave us a little gift wrapped in gold paper, opening up, and it was a bird of paradise. And with the bird of paradise, they gave us a little note, and the note was to the effect that, I probably have it with me this evening, I might show it at the end. The note was, Enda, thank you for travelling to our country and travelling across the other side of the world. Thank you for inspiring us about peak performance. Thank you for inspiring us how to live healthy lives and be well. We hope you continue to travel around the world and spread your inspiration to people like us in all countries around the world. And for me, that was really deeply moving. I didn't cry, but I felt like crying, because what they wrote in their message is exactly the mission and the vision that we have for our company. So going back to 2003, the guys in Papua New Guinea wrote on their little note that we give them no briefing on. They wrote in their little note what we had set out to begin the journey towards back in 2003, and maybe even way back beyond when I was 14, 15 years of age.
Well done you. My last question, 2003, 2015, 2027, is my maths right? Please God, we'll be here. What do you want to see happen by 2027 from your own personal perspective, your impact on the world, the extension of what you just shared through the Motivate vehicle or whatever else? What do you want to see happen?
Yeah, well, I suppose I probably have talked too much about myself, and I haven't been too much humble probably. I suppose I would start with people in the audience. You know, I really get frustrated and disappointed when I see people not achieving their potential. I get really frustrated with people in Ireland when we try and claw each other back. I get really frustrated whenever I go out of Ireland and meet brilliant people all around the world, like Father John Glynn, and he's helping communities in Papua New Guinea to be better. But then we come home here and we're like negative energy sappers. I get really frustrated. So what would I like to see in the world? First of all, I'd like to see a much more positive Ireland. I'd like to see an Ireland that is the best country in the world in terms of leadership. I'd like to see a world in which Ireland isn't just famous for being friendly, we actually are friendly. I would like to see in 10 years that we have cracked the obesity epidemic, and Jen spoke about that earlier on. I would like to see in 10 years that the learnings and teachings of people like Eckhart Tolle and people like, let's say, Martin Seligman are on the curriculum in every school across the world. What I'd like to see in 10 years, I'd like to see that we have an understanding of well-being, what it really is, not just what it says in a nice magazine, what it is. What I'd like to see in 10 years' time is that the Buddhist monk who I spent time with in Japan in a little ancient village called Kyoto, and you know how old that village is, I like to see that some of that Buddhist monks' teachings are being practiced in families right around the world, because the impact it'll have on people's lives. Now, it's pretty expansive, the picture that I'm painting. My mind is pretty expansive. Of course, you have to learn as a managing director how to bring that expansive vision and bring it into a nice, tight, aligned plan in terms of what I'm doing tomorrow in Dublin or what I'm doing over the weekend. For myself, if it's to be selfish, I like to be as much in love with life as I am today.
Great.
I like to be fitter than I am today.
Okay.
Desi ran at 75 years of age. I can guarantee you would put everybody in this room to shame in terms of fitness. Desi Ryan's times for 400 metres are better than my times today for 400 metres. When I run after 75-year-old or 400 metres, literally I'm blowing up after 400 metres, and he has left me probably 50 metres in his wake. So in 10 years' time, I want to be fitter and stronger and leaner and more athletic than I am today. In 10 years' time, I'd like to be a better leader. In 10 years' time, I'd like to be a dad. I'm not a dad. I'm not married. You can probably do the maths on what I've spent a lot of my life doing over the last 25 years. I am going with a beautiful girl. I do plan to get married. I do plan, of course, to have kids. My own mission in life, of course, is first and foremost to be a great husband and be a great dad. And then, of course, to impact other people's lives very powerfully. So in 10 years' time, I'd like to be, in short, as in love with life as I am today. I'd like to be fitter. Maybe there's a bit of ego in that as well. I would like to continue to be travelling around the world like the bird of paradise, inspiring people to achieve their potential. I would like to have a team around me who are much better than me, but I've been lucky enough to get in the doors of global performance crucibles. And finally, in 10 years' time, what would I like? Probably like my mother, who's taught in a secondary school in Northern Ireland for 35 years. And now when I go home to Armagh, people don't say there's Enda the Gaelic footballer. They say there's Enda, who's the son of Mary McNulty. Because Mary McNulty spent her whole life teaching and coaching and inspiring people to be at their best. So in 10 years, I would like to be in Papua New Guinea to meet a young guy called Arthur, who becomes the managing director of Did You Set over there. I would like in 10 years' time that I come down to Cork and Ballincollig and I meet a woman who said I inspired her to sit down with her little girl and inspire her little girl to be confident enough to step up to her full capability. I would love that. I would love that in Ballincollig I'm meeting Stephen Griffin in 10 years' time, and he'll be in serious shape in 10 years' time as well, by the way. I love that I'm still meeting for pints of beer and I'm still as grounded as I am today. So more than anything else, I hope I continue to live the dream.
Well, Enda, the very best with that journey. Ladies and gents, Mr. Enda McNulty.